Hello, Vangelis. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I am very happy to meet you. So, Vangelis, can you please tell me about yourself?
Sure. I was born in Greece, and at that time, my my Greek mother and my Greek father did not want to have any other children, so he actually wanted my mother to abort me, and she decided not to. And when I was born, I was put into an orphanage at 6 months old. And then I was adopted by a family at the age of two. It was a German family in Texas. And so I flew from Greece to Texas. And then I grew up in San Antonio. And I was there for about 20 years. And I went to school at the University of North Texas. And then I got a job at IBM. And then I've been in the corporate world of technology for about 46 years. And happen to be here in Costa Rica at this moment.
Okay, amazing answer. So, my first question is on your screen. What did you choose your career path?
I grew up in a very restrictive religious environment, and it was basically a dictatorship where you were told what to do. You did not have much of a choice. It was here's what you're going to do. I really wanted to play music. That's what I wanted to do. I was playing in clubs when I was 17. I was with a large group of studio musicians, and I wanted to entertain. I wanted to go be in movies, and I wanted to travel the world. But the church I was in, they were very, very strict and said, that's not a career. And my school counselors in high school told me, music is not a career. So again, I was not the rebellious type where I said, I'm going to live my life because I was taught to obey your mother, your father, your pastors, your teachers, and all these people that are supposed to know better than you. So I couldn't do what I wanted to do, and I was not a rebellious person. So I got a job at IBM, 1979. That's how I chose my path. Not that I wanted that, but again, I was not in an environment where you could choose your own stuff. Now I am, but all those years ago, that's not how I was conditioned or indoctrinated.
Okay, amazing. So, my next question is on your screen. Can you please describe your first job and how was your experience?
Well, the first job was at IBM. I was in administration, and after a couple of months, the person that was in charge of the network in the office, they got promoted, and so I got placed in that job, and I really started getting interested in the engineering part. And so I actually made a change from the administration to the engineering part. And I was told that I was the first person in all of IBM's 75-year history to ever make that switch. And so I did that. I was an engineer for about 8 years. And then a lot of the salespeople were selling customers products based on their commissions, not really what the customer really needed. So I became a salesperson for a couple of years. And then I became an instructor the last couple of years. And that's basically what I did during those 14 years. I was at IBM for 14 years.
Okay, amazing answer. So my next question is, what is your current role?
Well, in 1995, I got a call from a headhunter, and Cisco Networking was looking for consultants and instructors. So I I left IBM and I started working on my own for a couple of years. And then when I got that phone call, I became a consultant for Cisco. And during those years, I also worked in several different startup companies. I was an executive in a couple of different ones. And then in 1997, I also became an executive in another startup company and started doing work with them, plus also consulting with Cisco. And I was in all of the leading edge technologies. In 1995, the internet was just starting to be known. A lot of companies said, we're not going to connect to the internet. And I was going around the world helping companies connect to the internet. Then a couple of years later, helping them put voice on the internet. And then in 2003, worked with cable companies all over the world to connect to the internet and doing a lot of deployments, a lot of instructions, working with designing data centers and networks. And then I started working with artificial intelligence in 2017 and with NVIDIA. And I worked with a lot of military. A lot of my students were CIA, FBI. And in all those years traveling all over the world, I met a whole bunch of people, executives, rocket scientists, and so forth, who had a very good job, meaning they were making a really good salary, lived in very nice, luxurious places. And a lot of people are apprehensive in asking for help because you have a certain image. I mean, if you say someone, I would like some help, it makes you sound like you don't know what you're doing. So in a lot of the projects I had, so I was in Brazil for 3 months, I was in New York for 7 months, I was in England for several weeks. I mean, it's just, I was in a lot of places in a lot of countries for sometimes a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. And people got to know me. And as they got to know me, they started opening up, becoming vulnerable, and started saying, I make $1 million a year and I don't like my life. Really? And they would find out that I had the same scenario. I was living in a $1 million home, making $250,000 a year, traveling the world, and I hated my life because it wasn't my life. It was the life I was told or expected to live. And I was finding all of these other people, very successful people, telling me the same thing. And because I was an executive with a bunch of different companies, I was on the board of directors and I was making a lot of money and I was living in $1 million home, they realized, so you know what it's like? Yes, I know what it's like to be very successful. I know what it's like for people to say, I wish I had your life. And you're thinking, I don't like my life. So they realized, wow, I can really talk to somebody who understands. So for about 15 years, I was working with a lot of people that didn't really open up. They don't want to talk to a therapist who makes $60,000 a year. That person doesn't understand the scenario, but I did. And so I was helping all these people just for free. And a lot of them said, you should do this as a business. So about 3 years ago, I decided I'm going to stop all that and I'm going to just work with executives and stuff like that. Well, in the last 3 years, I realized executives are not going to watch a podcast. They're not going to watch YouTube or a TikTok video. That's not how they're going to reach. So the only way that I was able to reach them was to work in a project. So that's what I'm actually in the process of doing again, is going back out into the field so I can be among people that really are hesitant and apprehensive in reaching out for help. So that's what I'm currently doing.
Okay, amazing answer. So my next question is on your screen. What has been your biggest career achievement?
My biggest career achievement. I think it's getting to know myself. I mean, that doesn't sound like a career, but in all those decades, I mean, I was 50 years old when I realized I wasn't living my life. It took a long time because you get so conditioned that this is the way life is. And because the people that were teaching me, they were in the same scenario I was. They didn't really live their life. They were following followers. And so if you're not living your life, it's difficult for you to help others to learn how to and teach them and guide them to live their life. So I was 50 years old realizing why am I so frustrated? Why am I so unhappy? And it took a while. And then finally, when I realized I'm not living me, remember, I wanted to be a musician. I was told that that's satanic, that's the devil, music is terrible. I wasn't living my life. Now, I realized I was rebellious to me, unfaithful to me, but I was faithful to everyone else. So when I turned 50, I decided I'm now going to be faithful to me and rebellious to everybody else because I want to live my life. And when you look at a lot of really successful people that lived their life and you read their stories, a lot of them said, I left home when I was 17. I said, forget you, I'm living my life. Well, I wasn't conditioned to do that. So I decided I'm going to leave everything. So I left everything. And what's interesting, Ayan, is the people that I had known for 30, 40 years, they didn't reach out. I mean, they kind of, I'm sure they thought about it, but I didn't get phone calls and text messages and emails. You know, they just kind of, and I had met with them every week for years. So I realized that a lot of people were in a very similar scenario as me. They weren't living their life either. So the biggest career achievement is for me to realize that I wasn't living my life and to start living my life.
Oh, amazing answer. So my next question is on the screen. So, how do you plan to achieve your goals?
Once you start realizing who you are, then all those plans and all those scenarios that you were taught, it all changes. Because I was taught that you always look for the answers outside. They weren't there. So people will say, oh, you have all the answers inside you. That's easy to say that. But if you don't know who you are, where are those answers inside? They're hidden. And so the way that I achieve my goals is to go learn and recognize who I am so that I can start recognizing my voice. Not the voices of everybody external, because I knew those voices. Not some entity out there that you pray to. It's all inside here. So the way that I do my goals now is I listen inside. When you listen to a lot of people like, Richard Branson or a lot of very, billionaires or whatever, they'll say, I use my gut, I use my feelings, I use my instinct. Well, that's all inside. Your gut is not out and your instincts is not outside. And all that stuff is inside you. So to get to your goals is you start looking inside to find out what is inside you. And that's what I started doing.
Amazing, Vangelis. So my next question is on your screen. My next question is, what motivates you to keep going?
The way that I feel, you see, Back in the 1950s, there was a gentleman, Earl Nightingale, and he had a record. And he said, the strangest secret is if you want to change the outside, you change the inside. What people do is they do an outside modification. They try to change things out here, it'll change temporary and then goes back. That's because the outside is a reflection of the inside. So if you want to change the outside, you change the inside. So what motivates me is to see the outside beginning to align with what's inside. Does that make sense?
Amazing answers, Vangelis. So my next question is on your screen. How do you handle failures?
Well, it's how you define it. I don't, people say failure is just another opportunity. Yeah, but everything in life, every event is neutral. There are no pre-existing labels or categories to any event. So, for example, if someone says the word roller coaster, there's no label on that roller coaster. If someone enjoyed a roller coaster, they'll say, that's fantastic. If someone did not, they'll say, that's terrible. The roller coaster is neutral. It's how we define the event. So every event, if you say it's a failure, but it's an opportunity, you're still looking as it being a mistake. But if you just look at every event as something that you created so that you would be able to achieve whatever the purpose of that event was created, then there is no failure. It's not even an opportunity to whatever, it's just an event that you look at and find out, how do I feel? Is this a feeling that helps me to move forward, or is it a feeling that I realize, okay, why am I feeling this way? And you start looking at why that feeling is there. And then you look at it, you acknowledge it, and then you move on. So again, I don't look at it like that because that's how we were always taught. Fail and fail quickly. Well, it's still negative. It doesn't make you feel motivated. But if you look at every event as neutral, so how do you define this event? Well, and then you look at why, then you go inside and find out why I see that event. Well, you've noticed when two people look at something, they see it differently. It's the same event. It's where their mind is, how they feel about the event based on some past experience. So that's how I look at that.
Okay, amazing answer. So my next question is on your screen. What do you think is the key to success?
Define success for yourself. That's really the key. Because, as I said, I'm living in this $1 million home in California on a hill with an ocean view, making $250,000 a year. People telling me I'm successful, but why do I not feel great? Because I was not defining success for myself. So you have to define success for success to feel like success. And there is no destination. If you think of life as a journey, then you're not looking to finish something. Every day is a new opportunity for us to define things for ourselves. And then what we have are celebration points. People call them milestones. And if you just look at celebration points, and that way you don't feel, how many times have you said, if I had this, I'll be happy, and you have it and you're not happy? It's because you define happiness based on some external thing. So if you just define success as you being you, then you're always successful.
Amazing answer. So my next question is on your screen. How do you have any tips for maintaining work life balance?
If you read books about billionaires, they'll read about the fact that you really have to be focused and concentrated on one particular activity or goal. Because trying to be balanced, why are you wanting to be balanced? Is there this thing that you were told you have to have all these areas of your life? Financial, family, relationships, career, education, spiritual, nutritional. I mean, my gosh. I mean, if you think about a project and you've got 8 things on the project and you want to balance everything out, you have to divide your time and your focus to 8 things. Well, what if one day you're really motivated to do this one thing and that's where your energy is? But you got to keep everything balanced. You're not really energized in these other areas, but you're energized in this one. So you can't give it the real focus. Basically, you decide what's my priority. I mean, I've read a lot of successful people where they say, look, I decided to make my focus making money. Because if I have money, then I have the money to do all these other things. But if I don't have money, then I'll just be trying to focus on balancing everything. So if health is the biggest deal, then get healthy. If spirituality is the biggest deal, then have your spirituality be your focus. But trying to balance everything, who even knows what that even looks like? And how many people have tried it? And those are the people that are saying, I need to balance my life. Well, you've been trying to balance your life. How has that been working for you? So if you just stop trying to balance everything, and again, living by inspiration and by how you feel means that you have to be able to know who you are. Because if you don't know who you are, it's difficult to hear inspired thoughts. Because all the thoughts that I heard were all the thoughts that were programmed into me. They were not my beliefs or my inspired thoughts. I was living what everyone told me to live. But once I rebelled against that, and I said, I'm not living their life anymore, then all of a sudden things started balancing just automatically. Today I'm going to do this. I eat when I'm hungry, I sleep when I'm tired, and I work when I'm inspired. So if it's 3 o'clock and I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. If it's 4 o'clock and I want to take a nap, I take a nap. If it's 2 a.m. in the morning and I'm inspired to do something, I will do it. Because you don't know, you're not at 8 to 5. What if you're not motivated or creative at that time? And what if it's noon and you're not hungry? You see what I mean? So having a balanced life, if you just let your inspiration balance you, then you'll be inspired to do what your self, your real, true, authentic self wants to do at that time.
Vangelis, amazing answer. Too much amazing answers. Thank you so much, Vangelis. So my last question is on your screen. What advice do you give young people?
Find yourself a mentor. And my definition of a mentor is someone who has been where you are and is where you want to go. See, when I started, there was no internet. Okay. There was no, I mean, there was this building called the library. Okay. There was no internet. You couldn't just look up something or find something. Today, my gosh, you can find anything. So I would start looking for mentors. Look for someone. I'm not talking about a therapist. I'm not talking about accountability either. As someone who says, okay, do these 5 things, but no. someone who actually lives the life you want to live. Now, I knew it wasn't until I was 50 that I started actually knowing anything about a mentor because I wasn't taught any of this stuff. So my biggest advice for people is to find a mentor, and they used to have these things called apprenticeships years ago, where you would actually work with somebody that did what you wanted to do, and they would every day they would nurture you, teach you, guide you. Someone who is what you want to do and has been where you are. So, because I cannot see my blind spots, you cannot see your blind spots. You can see mine, and I can see yours, because we do not have each other's ego, each other's experiences. So, find someone who can help you to learn who you are. Once you do that, then you're on a great journey.
Thank you so much, Vangelis. It was a pleasure talking with you. I really enjoyed your answers and learned a lot from you. I wish you all the best for your future. Have a great day. Thank you so much, Vangelis.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.